right, man. I was listening to everybody sing. Just awesome. So cool. I want to welcome everybody to the Crossings Church again, and just remind you that we really are glad you're here for several reasons, but really because we believe that God is doing some cool things in and through the Crossings Church, and that we believe that He wants you to be a part of that as well. And so if you're visiting with us today, we're excited for you and what God has in store for your life. And if you're a member, then we're still excited to be here with you as well. One of the things we like to do at the Crossings is when someone makes a decision that they're going to follow Christ and they are baptized into Christ and they say, look, I'm no longer going to live this life for myself anymore. I'm putting my old life to death. And they're buried with Christ in baptism. They come up to a new life. We believe that is the changing point for everything in their life. From that point on, everything is different. They don't make decisions the same way. Their interactions with relationships with other people, everything changes. And there's this bright white line at that decision that says things are going to be different. And so we like to celebrate that because it's the best decision anybody can make. And this morning we had a couple of adults and some other people that we announced during first service. But this service, we got Tristan Pebbles, who studied with Eric Mosby and Zach Weber. And I'll tell you this. So I'm going to give you this book, and they're only going to go over this with you for the next week because we're actually switching to a new way of doing things. So they'll go over this with you until next Sunday when we talk about what we're going to do for the rest of the year. But welcome to the fam. Thank you. And we got Abby Scott, who studied with Deasia and Caitlin. It's always fun when you get to see like little bitty kids grow up and then make that relationship. Because I know that it's going to make everything better. Love you, girl. Glad you're here. She's running off the stage. Get me away from this creepy old man. So, we're getting ready to wind down the year. And as you look back over the year, I don't know what kind of year that you have had. I don't know what your year's been like, what your week's been like. But I know that there are people out there who you look back over this past year and you're like, man, it was really good. Some great things happened. And, you're like, it was great. I can't wait for the next. And then there are others of you who are probably like, I want this year to be done and over with because it sucked. It was terrible. All kinds of bad things happened. I just want to get out of this year and get into a new one. And I've had years that are like both of those things. And I think everybody in here has probably experienced that, to where you look back and you're like, man, only a few more days and this is all over. Jess is looking at me, I forgot. And I'll tell you this now. If you haven't registered for the banquet, please do so, all right? Because a lot of our members haven't. But now, back to the lesson. Sorry, Jess. It's on the Facebook page. You can register. For all of us, we have those times where we look back and we're like, man, I've got only 2 more days and we get out of this. And then I get to start something new. And I think that that's okay to look forward to starting something new. But I really believe that if we're going to be able to start the next thing new, like as next year comes around, I'm so excited for it because lots of incredible things I think are going to happen in 2020. There's things with my family that I look forward to that I'm excited about. And there's things as a church. We're planting another church next year. It's an exciting thing. That church plant in Columbia is going to go out, and it's going to be incredible. But I think if that Columbia plant, and if our next year is going to be really good, we need to do everything we can, even in these last couple of days, to make sure that we're finishing this year well. We're finishing well and finishing strong. And whatever's going on in your life, there may be circumstances that you're dealing with, things that you're going through, and it can be very difficult sometimes to look and be like, how am I going to finish this strong? I feel all this hurt. I feel all this pain. I've been through all this stuff in the past year, in the past few days, in the past week. And it's hard to look forward and think, man, I want to finish this year. I want to finish my relationship with God strong, when sometimes that can be very difficult. When we face really horrible circumstances, it's hard to see where God wants us to go and to want to keep pushing through. But, if you watch sports, I can't tell you how many times I've watched video clips of, Olympic runners, right? And there's this guy, and he's just tearing everybody up. And he's winning, and it looks like he's going to set a record, but he doesn't finish well. And he ends up getting passed, and how heartbreaking that is for that runner as they come to the end and realize, man, I trained, but I didn't finish strong. I didn't finish well, and so I didn't achieve what I wanted to achieve. My kids wrestle, and when we go to wrestling tournaments, there are certain schools who don't condition well. And so you hope you're wrestling those guys. And when you wrestle those guys, you know, man, if I can hold on past the first period, the second period, they're going to be totally gassed out by the third period. They're not going to have anything left in the tank, and I'm going to whoop them because they're not going to be able to finish strong because they don't have what it takes. And in our lives, I think there are times where we want to accomplish things in our relationship with God or in our families or in a year, and we look at it and we're like, man, I wanted to, but I just couldn't get there. I couldn't get past that. I couldn't finish strong for whatever reason. And when you look at God's word, there are times that you see things like that going on in God's word. In the book of Nehemiah, there's a story where God's people have been enslaved for years and years and years because they disobeyed him. But during their time that they were enslaved, the city of Jerusalem, their city where their home base had fallen apart, had been destroyed over time and over fights and over wars. And the wall around Jerusalem, which used to be like a pride and joy thing for them, had been destroyed. And there's this guy named Nehemiah, and he's looking, and he looks at that wall, and it breaks his heart because he knows God wants to see his people and his city restored. And so Nehemiah looks at it, and he's like, man, we have to do something about this. And so Nehemiah puts together a plan. And it's a really cool story. You should just go read the book of Nehemiah sometime. But he puts together this plan to fix all of this brokenness. And it starts out with great vigor. You know, he's super excited because like anything, when you first start it new and fresh, it's easy to be excited about it, right? We all know this. We know what's going to happen in January. The gyms are going to be packed, right? They're going to be packed full of people like me who are like, I need to shed some of this. Me and Juan were both this morning like admiring our bellies and being like, something's got to go this year. And, you know, but... And that might last for a week, a month. Juan's like, no, I'm good for 2 months, you know. But we all know that sometimes the excitement of that fades. And in the story of Nehemiah, what takes place is he puts together this plan and he puts people in place. He's like, we're going to rebuild this wall. You're responsible for this section and you're going to do this section. And we're all going to come together and it's going to be great. But when they get about halfway done with the wall, or a little more than halfway done, it starts taking that turn to where it's like, man, are we going to be able to do this? Are we going to finish this well? Are we going to finish it strong? Or is it just going to lay there and stay where it's at and be unfinished and not glorify God the way that we want it to? And that's where we're going to kind of jump into the story today and ask ourselves, what is it that keeps us from finishing strong? Because I think the one great thing about the Bible is never afraid to show the heroes of the Bible or God's people in a true light. And what I mean by that is when we look at them, we can learn a lot because God doesn't try to make it look like everything was great because they were normal people just like you and I. And just like we hit those times where we want to do something great, but we hit a lull or we hit a wall, and it makes us think we're not going to be able to finish, God's people run into those same types of things. So when I look at my life and I say, what keeps me from finishing strong, it's probably a lot of the same things that kept the people of the Bible from finishing strong. In Nehemiah chapter 4, they're at that point to where they're getting kind of tired. And they don't know if they're going to be able to finish the wall. And one of the lessons that we have to learn, something that keeps us from finishing strong, is that we struggle to finish strong because of fatigue. In Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 10, it says, they said the strength of the laborers is giving out. So they're rebuilding this wall, and Nehemiah and these people look around like, man, the workers who are doing this, they're getting wore out. They're getting tired. And all of a sudden it starts looking like, man, is this really going to happen? Are we going to be able to finish this wall? And I think if we're honest, you and I could probably all identify with that. You look over the past year, you look at your life and your relationship with God, your marriage, whatever it might be, and you've hit that point to where you're like, I'm sick and tired. I'm just exhausted of trying to do this, of finishing well. I don't know that I'm going to make it. And we all have had those moments in our lives where we hit that point where we're just so wore out, we're so fatigued that it's hard to imagine pushing through and God doing something great. And that's one of the things that we've got to look at in our lives and asking ourselves, man, am I going to finish stronger, or do I think I'm just so tired that I can't make it? The second reason that we struggle to finish strong is because of frustration. In Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 10, it says, and there is so much trash and rubble to be removed. So they're tired, but then they're starting to look around, and not only are they exhausted, but they're seeing all of the stuff that's in the way. And they're seeing all of the stuff that still has yet to be done, and it's so aggravating and so frustrating. And I don't know if you've ever hit that point where you're looking, you're like, man, I want to finish this. I know I started it, but it's so frustrating to see what still has to be done. And we start looking at all the things that that are in the way. And you look at your year, and you look at your marriage, and you look at your relationships, and you look at your job, and all these things, and we get so bound up that we almost just shut down because we're so frustrated with the situation. You know, I think that we all can be that way. I think about my son, Lincoln. I told the first service this, but, you know, the other day I was talking to Lincoln, and I said, Lincoln, you need to clean up this room. This room is trashed. And I could tell as soon as I said it, he walks into the room, and he looks around the room, and I mean, there were Legos everywhere. There was hangers. There were clothes, you know, blankets. I mean, it was a mess. Like, literally, you could barely see the whole floor. And Lincoln was so frustrated. It was so funny. He walks into the room, and as he's sitting there, he just goes and sits down on the ground. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Get up and clean this room up. And he's got big old tears in his eyes. And it's because he's looking around at this room, and he's like, this is going to take me forever. You know, he's frustrated because he knows what's ahead of him, and that frustration just sets him down on his rear. And it's funny because we look at little kids like that, and we're like, man, how childish is that, right? We're like, man, get up and clean that room up. But whenever it comes to our own lives and our own walk with God and the things that we face in our lives, there are times we do that exact same thing. Now, some of you might not actually throw up your hands and sit on your butt and throw a fit. Some of you probably do. You know, when I first met T.C. Brown, if you don't know T.C. is, he's the campus minister on one of our church plants. When I first met T.C., he would get frustrated, and he would literally sit on the floor and pout like a baby. And I would be like, dude, you are a grown man. What is wrong with you? Like, are you serious? But we all have done those things. Where you hit those things in your life and you just throw your hands up and you're like, forget it, I'm done. Like, I'm so frustrated, I can't finish this, I'm not going to finish it well. There's no point in even trying. And you could see as they're building this wall, they're hitting that point where like they're tired, they're frustrated. And then you go on beyond that, we also struggle to finish strong because of frailty. Nehemiah says, we ourselves are unable to rebuild the wall. And they just look and they're like, we're incapable. I am not capable of doing this. I'm not capable of finishing. I'm too frail. As a human, I can't do it. And God looks at them and God says, listen, there are things that you can do that you have no idea. One of the things that frustrates me the most about my son Jackson, is Jackson in here? Where you at, Jack? Sorry, bud. It always stinks being the preacher's kid. But one of the things that frustrates me about my son Jackson is Jackson, anybody who talks to Jackson, he's a smart kid. He's witty. He communicates great. But he doesn't do the greatest in school sometimes, and sometimes he'll tell me, I just can't. And I look at him like, dude, all of your teachers, all of them say that you're capable. This is not a capability issue. This is a grin and bear it and do what you need to do issue. And I know that, and I believe for him so much that it's not that he's too frail to do well in school. He's got it together if he wants to. He just has to put in the work. But sometimes as we experience fatigue and we experience frustration, we start buying into this lie that just says, I'm incapable, I'm incompetent, I can't do it. And we just say, well, since I can't do it, then I guess it doesn't need to get done at all. And so for all of us, we face all of these things as we go on. Another thing that we struggle with that keeps us from finishing strong is fear. In Nehemiah 4, verse 11, it says, and all this time our enemies were saying, they won't know what hit them. Before they know it, we'll be at their throats, killing them right and left. That will put a stop to the work. So on top of the frustration that's going on of how much has to be done and what all's in the way and all this, they have these enemies who are saying, we're going to kill you so that you can't finish this. And so fear starts to set in that says, man, I don't know, can we build the wall and protect ourselves? What about my life? What about my family? What am I going to do? And all of these fears start creeping in and start making them wonder, are we going to be able to finish this wall or not? And I think we can identify with that if we're really honest and say, man, there are all kinds of fears and insecurities that slip into our lives, and they eat us from the inside out, and they say, listen, you are not going to make it. And they start making us believe that the fear is stronger than what God is able to do. And that's just not the case. But when you look at you look at this year, or you look at situations you're facing in your life in a relationship with God, we need to ask ourselves, man, what kind of fears, what kind of insecurities are creeping in that are making me believe that I can't finish strong, that I can't finish well? You know, there's nothing more sad than seeing fear defeat somebody. especially when you look at them and you know they're capable. And I'm going to embarrass another one of my boys here, but he's not my son. So, and he'll know who I'm talking about when I say this. But we went to a wrestling match at Hazelwood West recently. He's already smiling. And there's a kid who I love, and he's a talented kid, and he's going to be a great wrestler. But right now, he's wrestling kids who outweigh him by a lot. Isn't that fair to say, Mitch? He's like, thanks, Gary. And I remember Mitch walking out into this match, and if I was him, I'd totally get it, because this dude is massive, wasn't he? He walks out, and Mitch is like this, walking out next to this kid. He's like, and I'm like, oh, no, And Mitch goes to line up with him, and Mitch is a strong kid, and he's capable. I'm spitting out my cough drop. He's a strong kid. Did you see me catch that, though? That was wicked, right? Anyway, so Mitch is a strong, capable kid, but I'm telling you, when he lines up from this dude across from him, Mitch is like this. And I'm like, oh, gosh. And so after the match, me and Mitch talking, I'm like, dude, you're strong and you're capable. Don't go in and lose before you even wrestle. Don't be so afraid that you're not able to at least try to finish well. But just like Mitch, just like me, all of us face those things that are so big, that are so scary, that we just have a hard time believing that God can do something incredible, that he can finish, that he can help us to finish strong. See, fatigue, frustration, fear, those things, frailty, they all keep us from that. But also we need to understand that we have an enemy that does not want you to finish strong. You have an enemy that wants you to give up, that doesn't want you to finish well, that wants you to end in failure. And we need to understand that we struggle to finish strong because Satan wants you to fail. And he works in a lot of different ways to make that happen. And a lot of times, he elicits the help of someone else, of other people. You see, Satan will find people to ridicule us as we're trying to finish strong. Nehemiah 4:1 says, when Sanballat heard that they were rebuilding the wall, he became angry and was greatly incensed, and he ridiculed the Jews. See, Satan found this dude. He said, listen, they're trying to rebuild the wall. Get in there. Go ridicule them. Do whatever you can. And he starts working on this guy to try to keep them from progressing and finishing strong. And in our lives, we face people like that, especially when it comes to our relationship with God sometimes, that Satan doesn't want to see you do well, so he will find people to talk stuff on you and to cause you issues and ridicule everything you do and pick you apart. I've seen it happen so many times in the lives of people starting a relationship with God, especially the college students that I work with on a regular basis. I see these kids become Christians, and a lot of them come from hurt and brokenness, and they want something so much different for their future than what they've grown up in, and they start this with great vigor, but as they go out and they try to do that, what ends up happening a lot of times is friends or family, they'll come around and they'll start talking in their ear, and they'll start talking about them, and they start ridiculing them, and they're like, oh yeah, okay, go do your church thing, go with your church people, and they start saying all these things and ridiculing them for trying to start something and finish something well. And Satan says, oh, okay, I know what I can do. I'll find somebody who was close to them who can ridicule them and try to bring them down. And we're going to all face those types of things. Satan will find people to rally against us. He will find those people. He won't make it one person. That might start out that way, but if that doesn't work, he's going to try to get a group of people, whatever he can do to stop you. In Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 7 and 8, it says this, when they heard that the work was going ahead and that the gaps in the wall were being repaired, they were furious. They all made plans to come fight against Jerusalem and throw us into confusion. See, Satan didn't want that wall to be finished either, and so not only does he have the people start ridiculing them, but then he amasses a group of people who come up to confront them and try to stop them. And we are going to face times in our lives where we have people who are rallying against us and people who are going to ridicule you because Satan doesn't want you to finish strong. And it happens so many times. Satan will find people to start rumors about us. As Nehemiah is rebuilding this wall, they start this rumor about him in Nehemiah chapter 6. It says, Sanballat's servant came and said, there is a rumor among the surrounding nations, and Geshem tells me it's true that you and the Jews are planning to rebel, and that is why you are building the wall. According to his reports, you plan to be king. And they're starting to try to undermine what Nehemiah and the men are doing, and they're saying, oh, Nehemiah just wants to be king. Nehemiah wasn't looking at this and saying, oh, I want to take over. He wanted to do God's will, but other people started rumors about him. They ridiculed him. They rallied against him. They tried to fight everything Satan could throw at him to keep him from finishing strong, and you may feel that way right now. I know there's only a couple days left in this year, and some of you are so ready to be out of this year, But I'm telling you, Satan is throwing everything he can at you and at his church because he doesn't want us to finish well. He doesn't want to see good things happen. He doesn't want to see people closer to God. So he is going to do anything he can, and he will throw any and everything at you that he is able because he's trying to trip you up. He doesn't want to see you make it to that finish line. And we've got to look at those things and ask ourselves, man, what is it that's keeping me from finishing strong? You should be able to look at that list and identify, oh, this is what it is for me. This is what I'm afraid of. These are the fears that are keeping me from being able to finish strong. This is the frustration that I'm feeling in my life that's keeping me from doing what God wants me to do. I'm exhausted. I'm tired. Whatever it is for you, you need to identify that, because until we identify the things that are keeping us from finishing strong, we're not going to be able to overcome those things. We've got to be able to look and say, this is what needs to be addressed. And then we have to come up with responses that result in us being able to have a strong finish. So what was it that allowed them to push through all of this junk in Nehemiah that they were facing in order to finish this wall, in order to finish strong? What did they do? See, the first thing that they did and the first thing that we have to do is we have to call out to God. In Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 4, it says, Nehemiah prayed, "O God, hear us. We are despised. Turn their insults back on them and let them be robbed in the land where they are prisoners." See, Nehemiah understood something. He understood that he wasn't capable of doing it on his own. And he had to look to God because he wasn't going to be able to finish this wall. And he said, God, I need your help. In verse 14 of that same chapter, it says this: after I looked things over, I stood up and said to the nobles and the officials and the rest of the people, don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome. And what he's saying is, he says, we could not make it on our own. We needed a great and awesome God to step in. So we called out to him and said, we need your help. See, whenever I was in high school, I was a lot smaller than I am, but I was more mouthy than I am. And that tends to cause problems. Marlon can attest to this. Like, I would run my mouth, and then I'd be like, all right. And I was lucky enough that I had friends and some who were bigger than me and badder than me, because I like to run my mouth and get myself into situations that I probably shouldn't have been in the first place, that I probably couldn't have backed up. And I think what Nehemiah is doing, he's looking, he's like, yeah, I'm looking a lot like Carrie right now, and I need somebody bigger to step in and take control of the situation, because we can't do this on our own. And I know in my life, and even in my ministry, as I've worked in the campus ministry, and I think even as a church, I think sometimes the crossings, we haven't relied on God the way that we should. Coming into the campus ministry this fall, we looked and we said, if we want to have the kind of year in the campus ministry, the kind of semester that we really want to see God work, it's not going to happen because we're so good. The wall wasn't built in Nehemiah's day because the people were such great builders, that they were fearless, that they were all these incredible things that happened because they called upon God. And as a campus ministry, we looked and said, we want to have a great semester, and we want it to finish strong. And so we said, we're going to have a prayer revolution that really focuses on God, and that we're going to call out to him, and we're going to realize he's capable of doing things that we're not capable of doing. And I think as a campus ministry, we've had probably the best semester in a lot of ways that we've ever had. And I've seen people grow in ways that I've never seen before, and that's not because we're so good or I'm so good or any of those things. It's because we finally looked and realized we've got to stop trying to accomplish great things on our own, because we will never finish well without God. And so we started looking, we started praying, we started fasting, we started saying, God, we need you to do great things. And he's been working in powerful ways because we've acknowledged that we can't do it. And we've got to call out to God if we want to finish strong. You see, the things that you're facing in your life, the things that are going on right now, there are things that you can't handle on your own. There are things that you're not powerful enough, you're not strong enough to fix, because we want to fix everything, right? We want everything to be fixed and dealt with. And God goes, you can't fix this, but I can take care of it. And I can make things happen that you would never imagine and you would never dream. And even in the worst of circumstances, I can bring about something really, really good. And so we've got to start looking to God and calling out to him and saying, God, I need you to get involved in this situation because I can't do this. You know, during first service and second service today, as we were worshiping and as I was speaking, I was watching, and there were people crying during worship and people crying during the sermon. And I know what some of those issues are and what people are going through, and some of it's really tough, messed up stuff. But I also know that God can bring them through on the other side if we rely on him. Some of those things I don't know, but I don't care what the situation is, whether I know what it is or not. I can promise you that God can handle things that you can't. And the reason I can promise you that is because my whole life I've seen him do those things. I've seen people face things that other people would look at and be, it's like, this is impossible to finish well. How's my life? How's my relationship with God? How's my year? How's my marriage? How's this situation going to work out well and me be able to finish strong? There's no way. And then God intervenes, and they're like, that was crazy. God just did something so amazing with that. And we've got to learn to start calling out to God. That's going to help us finish strong. The second thing is that I have to connect with others. I have to connect with other people if I'm going to be able to finish strong. First of all, others can provide physical support. In Nehemiah 4:9, it says, we prayed to our God and posted a guard day and night to meet this threat. See, they didn't think they were going to be able to keep building because these people were saying, we're going to come attack you so that way you can't finish the wall. And they had to connect with one another because they needed that protection. They needed that physical support. Yesterday, whenever I was, at this wrestling tournament, I looked down and I was like, oh my gosh, that's Tyron Woodley down there. And I was like, that's so cool. And if you don't know who that is, he's one of the best fighters in the UFC. And he's from St. Louis, and his son was wrestling in this tournament. And I was like, that's crazy. And so I text Matt Cawley, and I'm like, hey, your buddy Tyron's here. And he's like, oh, go tell him I said hello. So I was like, yes, I found a way to talk to Tyron Woodley, right? You know, it's going to be cool. So I went up, and I was talking to him. I said, hey, Matt Cawley wanted me to find you and tell you hello. And he's like, oh, Cawley, huh? And he started laughing. I was like, yeah. He was like, man, that dude. And he's shaking his head. And I'm like, what? And he goes, man, I'll tell you something. He said, it took me 2 to 3 weeks to get a single takedown at that dude on my training camp. And I said, are you for real? He goes, yeah, I brought him in to train with me, and I couldn't take him down. He's like, if he would have went to the UFC and fought, the dude would have been a monster. He's like, when I fought Pachinko, it was nothing because I had already wrestled Matt. And I was like, what? You know, and he was like, I need to get back in the training room with that dude. And I was laughing, you know, and I was telling Matt, you know, some of the stuff that he was saying or whatever. But you see, fighters understand something. They understand that if they're going to get better and if they're going to be able to finish strong in matches, that they need some physical support. They need other people alongside of them. And all of us need to understand that's why, you know, when you look at teams, when you look at basketball, there's probably no sport this is more true. You know, when I watch basketball, sometimes it's frustrating because you'll have a team who will have one really good player, and he refuses to involve the rest of the team, and their team can't seem to win, even though they have one of the best players. And you look at it and you're like, yeah, because you're not a team player. You're not connecting with anybody else. If you don't learn to pass the ball and have some assists and involve other people in the game, you're not going to win. And it's so frustrating because if they would just connect with those other guys, you would see a team that would really start to blossom and grow. And it's the same thing in our lives. Sometimes we hit these things and we want to finish strong, but we refuse to connect with anybody else who could provide us the support we need. And not only physical support, but others can provide emotional support that we all need. Nehemiah 4:14 says, I looked them over and proceeded to tell the nobles, the leaders, and the rest of the people, don't be afraid of our enemies. Remember how great and awe-inspiring the Lord is. And sometimes we need that cheerleader, that emotional cheerleader in our corner that says, listen, I know right now it looks really bad, but don't give up. Don't be afraid. I've got this. We will do this together. And we band around each other and we gather up. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people at the crossings go through things. And they're like, man, if it wasn't for my small group, if it wasn't for my girls, if it wasn't for my guys, I don't know how I would have gotten through that. I don't know how other people get through life without these connections. I can't tell you how many times I've heard that. And that's in good and bad circumstances. In a loss, when you lose someone that you love desperately, or something bad or tragic happens, or someone makes a horrible decision or mistake, and people gather around those people, it's incredible to see how God works, not only in his greatness, but in using other people to connect with us, even in really good times. You know, I've heard Juan and Summer both talk about how when Jaden was born, it was so cool because that was a really good thing. It was exciting. But if you would have walked into that waiting room, like the night Jaden was born, there were people like sleeping all over the floor. And I know the hospital staff was like, what is wrong with these people? But everybody wanted to provide that emotional support, even in a good time. That was like, we're excited for you too. And we believe God's going to do great things. It was an exciting thing. And I've heard Juan and Summer both be like, you know, thinking about that just is so encouraging to know that we have a family like that wants something so good for us. How do people get through some of the crap that happens in life, in everyday life, without a support system around them? And I'm telling you, there is no better support system that you're going to find than God's people. And if you're going to church somewhere and you're sitting down on a Sunday morning and you're leaving, and that's all of the relationship that you have with the people in that building, something's not right. That is not church. Don't call that church, because that's not what it is. Because church is about a relationship with God and a connection with each other. And if you walk out of those doors on a Sunday morning and there's no connection outside of this building, something's seriously wrong, and you're not going to finish strong without having those connections. I don't care how stable of a person you are, you need other people with you. Nehemiah 4:19 and 20 says, so much work has to be done in different places that we are widely separated from one another on the wall. He's like, man, it's discouraging because there's all this work to be done, but we're not close to each other either. And so you look what Nehemiah says. He says, when you hear the trumpet assemble around me, our God will fight for all of us. And he says, listen, it keeps falling off. And he says, listen, I want you to gather together because we need those relationships, that connection. When bad things happen, who do you think about being around? Who have you connected with that you know is going to help you? It's been so neat over the past several weeks at the crossings. There's been some stuff in some people's lives that have just been hurtful and been going on, but it's been so cool just to see people like suction to those people and be like, hey, we're gonna work our way through these things because listen, it's part of life. It's what happens. But we get to do it together. And that's such an exciting thing to have that connection. Others provide that emotional support. So I have to call to God. I have to connect with others. And then the third thing is I have to continue to work. In Nehemiah 4:6, it says, we kept at it, repairing and building the wall. They had all this crazy stuff going on. These people were threatening them. There were times when they were building the wall and they had to hold a weapon in one hand as they were building the other because people were right there ready to fight them. So they're holding a sword in one hand as they're building. And they kept working no matter what. And I think it's funny because, we look at things like I was telling you about with Lincoln earlier where he sits down on the floor and is like, just kind of gives up because he's so aggravated. And we look at little kids like that and we're like, no, you got to push through, right? We look at these little kids and we're like, you got to do what you need to do regardless of the circumstances that are going on around you. That's life, kid. Get up and do it, right? But whenever it comes to the things that happen in our own lives, sometimes we refuse to be the people who just continue to work no matter what's going on. And I'm not saying you can't be discouraged and you can't go through difficult times. Every single person is going to do that. But if you're going to finish strong in those moments, you cannot stop moving forward either. You have to make a decision that says, okay, yeah, this is really bad right now. But I'm going to put one foot in front of the other, and I'm going to trust God, and I'm going to trust God's people, and I'm going to connect with them in a way, and we're going to keep working at this together. We refuse to stop no matter how bad things are going because I want to finish well, and I want to finish strong. Nehemiah 4:21 says, half of us held spears, so we continued to work. Half of us held spears from early dawn until the stars came out. They're like, look, nothing is going to stop this. I don't care if we have to stay up from morning till night and someone has to stand guard with a weapon. I refuse to stop moving forward on this. What kind of attitude are you taking whenever you're hitting those tough spots where you're wondering, am I going to be able to finish strong? Are you taking on an attitude that says, forget it, screw it, I can't do it, it's over, and we're sitting down and we're pouting like children? Or are you going to stand up and say, you know what, I trust God. He's given me people. They're going to walk alongside me. I'm going to keep drudging forward, even if it's a slow drudge right now. I'm not going to give in. I'm not going to give up. I'm not going to allow Satan to win, but I'm going to continue to fight. I'm going to continue to work because that's what Nehemiah did. And that's what we have to choose to do. And then the fourth thing is I have to concentrate on my purpose. There's something about having a purpose that allows us to finish well, even when we're so tired, when we're so exhausted, when we don't know if we can make it. When you have something that's bigger than yourself to be a part of, it helps drive you. It helps keep you moving forward. Nehemiah 4:14 says, put your minds on the master and then fight for your brothers, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your homes. You notice he says there, look, he says, think about what's going on. Think of something bigger than yourself. Put your minds on the master and then fight for everything else. And he says, fight for your families. Especially for you parents here. There are times where, as a parent, you just want to give up. Either that or choke your kid, right? You're like, something's got to change. Something's got to break here. And something's got to change. But you look at what Nehemiah is saying. He says, listen, when you hit those times when you don't know if you're going to be able to keep going, if you're not going to be able to finish strong, he says, you need to remember God, and you need to put him first, and then you need to realize what you're fighting for. You're fighting for your families. Because I'm telling you right now, there's nothing that is going to change your family's life and make it better than you having a consistent, powerful relationship with God. And you have to fight for your kids, and you have to fight for your families, and you have to finish strong for their sake. See, Nehemiah understood God wanted that wall rebuilt, and he wanted the glory to go to God, and he also understood what it was going to say to the future generations whenever they saw that wall completed. When they finished strong, it was going to say to them, God's still here, he hasn't abandoned us, and he's going to bring us back. And he understood what that would say to those families, and he says, you got to keep that at the forefront of your mind. Keep God at the top of your priorities, and you'll be able to push through these things. When you look at John 17, verse 4, it says, I have brought you glory on earth by completing the work you have for me to do. That's Jesus talking. And he says, listen, there were times where even Jesus looked, and he's like, God, if there is any other way for this to happen, please let it happen that way. See, even Jesus experienced the same temptations we have, to where it would be a lot easier to say, man, if I don't have to finish this thing, that would be awesome. And God's like, no, you're going to finish it. And Jesus said, okay, because it's going to glorify you, I'm going to do it, because he had a greater purpose and a greater intent in mind to glorify God, to save us. He was able to finish well. He was able to finish strong. And the same thing happened whenever it comes to the book of Nehemiah. In Nehemiah 6, verse 15, it says, so on October 2nd, the wall was finished, just 52 days after we had begun. See, this task that had taken years and years and years, and nothing had changed and nothing gotten better, and this wall had been in disrepair. In 52 days, they completed this massive wall. It was completely rebuilt. They finished strong and they finished well because they knew what really mattered. And if you're having a hard time making it through and finishing strong, you have to really ask yourself, are you really focusing on the greatest purpose? Are you focusing on what God wants you to do in your life? There's a story about a swimmer named Florence Chadwick, and it goes like this, and it's a true story. It was a fog-shrouded morning on July 4th, 1952, when a young woman named Florence Chadwick waded into the waters off Catalina Island. She intended to swim the channel from Catalina to the California coast. Long-distance swimming was not new to her. She had been the first woman to swim the English Channel in both directions, and the water was numbing on that day, cold numbing. The fog was so thick she could hardly see the boat and her party. Several times, sharks had to be driven away with rifle fire, and she swam more than 15 hours before she asked to be taken out of the water. Her trainer encouraged her to keep on swimming because they were so close to land. But when Florence looked, all she saw was the fog, and she quit only a half a mile from the coast. Later, she said, I'm not excusing myself, but if I could have just seen the land, I could have made it. It wasn't the cold, and it wasn't the fear, it wasn't the exhaustion that caused her to fail. It was the fog. 2 months later, Florence Chadwick, on a clear day, swam from Catalina to the shore in record time because she could see her goal. See, whenever you can see what really matters, and when you're able to look forward and you're able to look forward to that purpose, you're able to say, I see where I need to go. I see where God wants to get me. And keeping our minds focused on those things helps us to be able to finish strong. But so many times we get swept up by everything else around us, and we forget that God has great things in store for us. Galatians 6:9 says, don't get tired of doing what is good. Don't get discouraged and give up, for you will reap a harvest of blessing at an appropriate time. Proverbs 24:12 says, God is watching you and he will know. He will reward each person for what he's done. It's saying, listen, keep your eye on the prize because God is going to bless you. Finish strong because there's something so great waiting for you on the other side of all the frustration and the fear and all the frailty that you feel in your life. If you will just keep pushing through and remember your purpose, you're going to make it. Don't give up. See, there are times, I think, in all of our lives where we doubt whether or not God can use us. But there are some things that we need to remember about God and his word and even his people from the past. Whenever you're sitting there and you're thinking, man, I just can't finish strong, I'm not going to make it, and you start thinking about all the junk that's going on in your life, there are some people that you need to remember from the Bible. First of all, Noah was a drunk. Abraham was too old, Isaac was a daydreamer, and Jacob was a liar. Leah was ugly, Joseph was abused, Moses had a stuttering problem, Gideon was afraid, Samson had long hair and was known as a womanizer, Rahab was a prostitute, Jeremiah and Timothy were considered too young, David had an affair and was a murderer. Elijah was suicidal. Isaiah preached naked. Jonah ran from God. Naomi was a widow. Jacob went bankrupt. John the Baptist ate bugs. Peter denied Jesus. The disciples fell asleep while praying when Jesus needed them the most. Martha worried about everything. The Samaritan woman was divorced more than once. Zacchaeus was too small. Paul was too religious. Timothy had ulcers. And Lazarus was dead. Good luck beating that one. But whenever you look at those are people who finish things strong. And God is able to work through all kinds of circumstances. No matter what you think is going on, when you're looking towards that finish and you're asking yourself, am I going to make it? You need to remember that God is in control. He's connected you with good people. And you need to just continue to work and focus on your purpose, and you'll finish strong. What is it in your life right now that you need to finish? What are you having a difficult time doing? And what is going to be your next step? That's the question you really need to ask yourself. In 2 Corinthians 8:11, it says, on with it then. Finish the job. Be as eager to finish it as you were to plan it, and do it with what you have now. He says, listen, take away all the excuses. Let's finish this, and let's finish it strong. We only have a couple days left in this year, but if we want to have a good 2020, doesn't it make sense that we should start now? Doesn't it make sense that we should finish this strong? When it comes to all those things in your life, I don't know what it is that you need to look at, what you need to examine, but as you fill out that card in just a moment when the worship team sings, there's a Crossings communication card in your bulletin. And you say, man, I need help with this. I need to overcome this fear. I need to call out to God. I need to make some connections. In your bulletin, there's a thing called the Manasseh support groups. And it lists all the classes that are coming, anger management, comforting Rachel for those who have chosen to have an abortion, dealing with, divorce care, the game plan, grief. All these things are designed to help us to be able to connect with other people in a way that helps us to finish strong. I don't know what decision you need to make, but I know that God wants you to finish well, and I know that he has great plans for your life. So when the worship team sings that next song, fill that card out and say, all right, God, this is what I'm going to do. This is my next step. Help me. Give me what I need to make it. Give me what I need to finish strong. And then during the second song, we'll stand up. The baskets will be passed. For our members, we need your card and your contribution. For our guests, don't put any money in that basket. Just put that card in there with a decision that says, I'm going to finish strong, and this is what I need from you to do it. And allow God a chance to work. Let's pray. Father in heaven, God, thank you again just for being a God who loves us, who wants great things for our lives. God, that you do want to see us finish well. You want to see amazing things happen. God, help us to love you, to put you first so that that can happen. Help us to rely on you, to rely on each other, God. And help us to be people who, when we look back, can be proud of the race that we've run and that we've finished it well. So in Jesus' name we pray.